Hey, how you doing? Justin here. Today we're going to talk about how and why you should be using time boxing for your guitar practice. If you haven't heard of time boxing before, it's basically specifying an amount of time that you're going to spend doing each item on your practice routine or each thing that you want to work on. When I first heard about it, I thought it was absolutely crazy. I was the kind of guy who'd just be like, oh, I want to learn this song or do this thing. Oh, if I had to practice scales, I'd practice scales a bit till I got bored or do an exercise for a little bit and, skipped around and just did kind of whatever I felt like. And that does feel good to practice, but there definitely comes a point where time boxing and thinking about exactly what it is that you want to practice and for how long becomes really, really valuable. I'd say that it's one of the most effective practice tools that you got. It can really supercharge how much stuff you get done in your practice time, especially if you're like me and you've got a limited amount of practice time. You really, really want to make the most of it. So let's first of all talk about the benefits that you get from time boxing your practice. So the first and biggest benefit that you get from time boxing is focus. So when you're practicing anything at all, you should know how and why you're practicing something before it even makes it onto the routine. But you really want to know the objective as well. You wouldn't put like scale practice on your practice routine without knowing why you are practicing the scale. Are you doing it to work on the synchronicity between the two hands? So practicing it with a metronome. Are you trying to work on your picking skills, your alternate picking, or your fretting hand accuracy? What is it about any given exercise that you should be paying attention to? And then for the 5 minutes of your time box practice, you want to keep your attention right there. Don't allow yourself to be distracted by either other parts of the practice or by completely random thoughts. You don't want to be thinking about what you're having for dinner or if that girl that you like is going to be at the club on the weekend or whatever. That sort of stuff is not the kind of thing that you want to think about while you're practicing. Save that for after the timer's gone off when you finished your practice. For that 5 minutes, you want to be absolutely zoned in on it. If those other thoughts come in, you're just like, not now, go away, I'm trying to focus on this. It's very much like mindful meditation practice where you focus on your breath, and if you get these other thoughts come in, you go, oh, there's a thought there, go away, now's not the time. So you want to try and develop that kind of level of focus for your guitar practice. It's an incredibly powerful tool if you can do just from that one thing, one benefit of time boxing. It means that everything that you practice, you'll be so much more aware, so present in what you're doing, that it means that the practice that you do is worth probably double of that unfocused stuff where you're practicing and thinking about other stuff. There are times where unfocused practice is the objective. For example, developing a fingerstyle pattern. So you probably want to do focused practice first of all to make sure you're doing it correctly, but then the idea would be to deliberately not think about what you're doing to allow that automation to settle in. Using a timer in that instance is really good because it'll kind of give you that little wake-up call. For that practice, sometimes I wouldn't recommend time boxing. Actually, I think that sort of practice is better done in front of the telly or something like that, where you're just doing it over and over again for a longer period. But that's a discussion for another time. Generally speaking, time boxing is absolutely incredible for everything except for the stuff where you shouldn't be focused. The second really awesome benefit that you get from time boxing is increased motivation. Every time you tick the done box on your practice routine, you get a small but very effective dopamine hit. Dopamine's the little chemical that gets released in your brain as a reward. It makes you feel good. So every time you tick in that thing, it's like, whoa, yeah, this feels good. I'm practicing. It's encouraging, especially if you're doing it quite a bit. Again, rather than doing 1 hour of random practice, if you're doing little 5-minute slots, there you've got 6 times that you're going to tick that box and get the little dopamine hit. And it really can help keep you on track for your practice routine. Really works. The third benefit, which is probably obvious by now, is that you use your time effectively. Of course, if you're really focused on your stuff, you're making the best use of our time. Now, most of us these days are time poor. We've got lots of things that we want to do with our lives. So if you've got a limited amount of time to practice, you definitely want to make the most of it. And when you're time boxing and you're really focused for that little sprint of effort, you're much less likely to delve into procrastination and just wondering about things that you shouldn't be wondering about in your practice time. The fourth benefit of time boxing your guitar practice is it's likely to have a positive impact on other areas of your life too. Learning to be more present and focus your attention on whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's relationships with other people or practicing or studying, whatever it is that you're doing, I think is a massive benefit for all of us. So how do you get started with time boxing your practice? Well, if you're using one of my beginner courses, you've probably been time boxing already because I specify how long you should be practicing what for. My practice assistant will help you with that as well. The practice routine generator in the app also has timers built in. It is a really important part of practice, I think. If you're new to the idea, the basic idea would be you need a routine of the things that you want to work on. If you haven't seen it before, I've got a lesson called the Holistic Practice Routine, which explains how I think you should approach practicing and dividing up what stuff that you need to work on. So you know what it is that you need to work on, then you need a timer. Now, when I started, I had like a kitchen timer, looked like a tomato, Pomodoro technique, where you turned it around for 5 minutes, let it go, and it would ring a little bell at the end, and I'd go on to the next thing. These days I use my phone. Now the phone timer is certainly more convenient, but make sure you got notifications turned off because you don't want to be distracted in the middle of your practice routine by text messages from people or notifications about Instagram or whatever. I think generally speaking, turning notifications off is a good life lesson as well, just so you don't get continuously distracted by your phone. But if you're going to use your phone for practice, make sure you got notifications off if you're using that as your timer. So you know what it is that you're going to practice, you know how long it is that you're going to practice for, you hit the timer and you go. You start practicing. Every time you find your attention drifting, just bring it back to what you're practicing again. Begin again. Go, okay, not now, back you go. And then keep practicing, drifting away again, thinking about something, back you go to whatever it is that you should be practicing. Don't be afraid to begin again. Okay, it's totally all right. Getting distracted in the early stages is actually a good thing. It's like a muscle, your attention. So every time you get distracted and you bring your attention back to what you should be doing, you're strengthening your attention. It's very easy when you start doing practice like this to feel like, I can never concentrate for 5 minutes. I'm always getting distracted by stuff. It's okay. Don't let yourself get distracted. You don't want to get distracted, but if you do, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just go like, okay, no, now's not the time for that. Bring it back. If you get those other thoughts, they're going to pop up. You can't stop other thoughts coming into your mind. You just don't want to engage with them. That's the trick. You don't want to get like, what am I having for dinner tonight? Oh, that's an interesting thought. Gone. And then you're back to what you want. Don't go, what am I having for dinner tonight? Oh, maybe I fancy pasta or fish and chips, whatever. So don't engage with it. The thought's going to come, but just let it go away again. And then just totally get back to being absorbed in what it is that you're practicing. Another really interesting benefit of using a countdown timer when you practice is that it gives you an end point. I don't know if any of you have run a long race before. If you run a marathon, you can be slogging along, but when you get to the end, when you see the finish line, you can summon some energy that wasn't there before and really go for that last section because at that point, after you cross the finish line, you can relax, you can stop. So when you're asking a lot of brain power or physical power to do something, if you're practicing something physically, technically difficult on the guitar, knowing that there's an end point will allow your body to really push the limit up to that 5 minutes and then have a rest. If you ask your mind or your muscles to continually go really hard for a long period of time, there's some part of our psychology that stops you getting like the maximum power out of your brain or your hands. There'll always be a bit held in reserve, but when you've got that finish line, you can really push all of the way through to the end of your 5 minutes. Once the timer has gone off to end your 5-minute practice, don't forget to tick the done box so you get that little dopamine hit. And I would recommend just having 30 seconds to a minute off in between every 5-minute practice session. I wouldn't recommend going straight into the next thing. Just take a minute, chill out, maybe walk around the room, have a sip of tea, whatever. Just have 20, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, just to relax. You could check your phone if you really need to, whatever. Just a very short break before you move on to the next item. I'm hoping by this point I've convinced you that time boxing your guitar practice is going to be super good for you. I really believe that effective practice can supercharge your guitar progress. So I've got a few extra tips for you as well. Tip number 1, avoid physical or mental fatigue. This is really important, particularly physical things. If you're practicing bar chords or like a finger gym exercise, something that's physically demanding, you don't want to overdo it or you might injure yourself. And time boxing is perfect for that. It gives you these short bursts of full-on activity. Hopefully you'll be doing those exercises every day because again, you wouldn't be doing 5 minutes of it, a quick break, and then another 5 minutes, a quick break. You'd be spreading that practice out over some time, which gives you even more benefits, particularly with the physical stuff. With the mental stuff, again, mental fatigue stops you learning things as well. If you're trying to learn a whole bunch of new chords and you spend a half an hour on it in one go, the last 10 minutes of that is probably going to be pretty useless because you're already going to be full. So again, breaking up the stuff into an effective practice routine, we'll talk about that in just a sec, will really help, but the time boxing really is the key. Tip number 2 is to make sure that you're using a holistic practice routine. I've just done a super comprehensive lesson on that. There'll be a link down below. If you haven't seen it already, I'd strongly suggest that you go and check it out. Basically, you really want to make sure that you have a well-rounded practice routine, that you're working on all of the things that you should. It's very easy to slip into the habit of practicing only the things that you're good at and not working on the stuff that you probably should be doing. So having a nicely crafted, holistic practice routine is super beneficial for your guitar progress. Tip number 3 is to stop procrastinating and just do it. It's a really good thing about both time boxing and having a practice routine is that you know what you should be doing. All you have to do is actually do it. You don't need to think about it. You don't have to think about which way you should do this or how long you should do that. You've made that decision. So now you just got to get on with it. It's a really cool thing, this idea of ticking off the boxes when you're practicing as well. It kind of gamifies it a bit so you can see how much practice you've done that week and that month and how it's going well. And, you know, it's a really, really super idea. Stop procrastinating, gamify your practice routine. Tip number 4, don't try to multitask. It doesn't work. I hear from people quite frequently that, oh, you know, what you mean you can't multitask and do this and this at the same time? Well, no. What you can do is divide your attention and focus a little bit on this and a bit on that and a bit on that. That's not really true multitasking. Our brains can only really truly focus on one thing at one time. So don't even attempt to have multiple things going on at the same time, unless it's the objective. If you're doing the fingerstyle practice while watching TV and you're deliberately trying to distract yourself, of course, that is okay. But other than that, don't try to multitask. Tip number 5, no more distractions. I already talked a bit about how important it is, I think, to turn off notifications on your phone, particularly if you're using it as your countdown timer. But it's a really good idea to try and bring that into the real world as well. You know, make sure your friends or family or flatmates know that when you're doing your guitar practice, you're not to be disturbed. Don't answer the phone unless it's super important, or I don't know, you're a fireman and you're practicing off duty in the fire station and the bell goes off. You're probably going to have to give up your practice routine. So there's going to be times the doorbell goes and you're expecting a delivery, whatever. So there are going to be times when you need to be pausing your practice, but really do your best to try and stay focused when you're doing your practice. Really hone in your attention on what it is that you're supposed to be doing. Tip number 6, possibly the most important one of all, is don't forget the playtime. We play guitar. It's got to be fun, right? In this lesson, I've talked a lot about organized practice routines, set 5 minutes, practicing scales, doing all of these things. It's all a little bit rigid, but you also want to make sure that you leave plenty of time for just playing and enjoying the guitar, playing whatever you want, whatever songs you want, doing whatever you want, mucking around with effects, researching gear online, whatever it is that's enjoyable around guitar and guitar practice for you. You should be doing plenty of time on that. Personally, I try to keep it at half and half. So I do half of my practice time is going to be like organized practice stuff, and the other half is just playing, just doing whatever I want, writing, getting creative. I think that playtime is really important. It's easy, very easy, especially when you get used to the proper practice routine and the little dopamine hit, that you get into this idea where that is the important part of practice. But it's not. That relaxed, playful, exploratory, curious practice is also really important. So don't forget that and get bogged down too much in all of the technical stuff. I really hope this lesson helps you on your guitar journey. This is part of grade 3 over on the website. You might want to go and check out that entire course if you haven't done already. Hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you for plenty more very soon. You take care. Bye-bye.